Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. People read books for many reasons. Some read novels for entertainment, some for knowledge, some to escape reality, some to find solutions to problems, and some to find enlightenment. But of all the books that people read, and all the reasons for reading them, I would imagine that few would approach the great classics of literature with the expectation of finding nirvana. But that's about to change, because in his latest book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, award-winning author Dean Sluyter unpacks the Dharma of more than 20 major writers, from Hemingway, Whitman and William Blake to Shakespeare, Dickinson, Salinger, Twain and Dr. Seuss, to inspire readers to deepen their own spiritual life and see literature in a fresh new way as a path of awakening. Dean Sluyter has taught authentic traditional approaches to meditation and awakening since 1970. He gives talks, workshops and retreats throughout the United States and beyond, from Ivy League colleges to maximum security prisons, and has been featured on National Public Radio, Coast to Coast AM, The Dr. Oz Show, and in the New York Times and the Oprah magazine. Dean Sluyter, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's great to be here.
Dean, in your introduction to the Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, you write that you found your first guru at the age of 12 on the cover of Mad magazine, not an overtly spiritual publication. Tell us about that experience.
Oh my, that was a surprise. What happened was I was, I believe, 11 years old, and my mother had sent me out to the garage to clear out the back seat of our Nash Rambler station wagon because this was 1961. We were going to go to a drive-in movie that night, which also because it was 1961. And I was picking up all the comic books that my brothers and I had left in the back seat. And all this time, my mind was churning. Even at that age, my mind was kind of in a state of constant churning anxiety, which I think is common for a lot of people, even at that age. The next thing that I picked up was the Mad magazine, and as always on the cover, there was a picture of their idiot, gap-toothed, cockeyed mascot, Alfred E. Newman, and his motto, which was, "What? Me worry?" And all of a sudden, my mind went dead silent. All of a sudden, I realized, oh, this churning thing I've been doing, this is called worry. And I've been doing it. It's not a thing that happens to me. It's like my foot has been on the gas pedal, revving that engine. And now that I found that, oh, I can take my foot off that engine, off that pedal. And the engine stopped. And just I went into this kind of deep silence that I'd never experienced before. And it was really as if the top of my head was taken off, and I just, as if my brain merged with the sky, and I was just floating in bliss all that evening until I drifted off to sleep that night. So later on, I started reading the books and going, oh, in this tradition that's called samadhi, in this tradition that's called satori, in this tradition that's called grace. And it's not just some weird arbitrary thing. This is a thing that's been known for thousands of years, and there's methods, meditative methods for cultivating it and making it a part of your daily life.
I hope you told them they could have used that as an endorsement.
They actually just stopped publishing about a year or so ago.
That's right, yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I was only 2 pages into the Dharma Bum's Guide when I fell head over heels in love with it, reading your sublime and very funny description of your second guru, who you found in a Southern California classroom. I'd like to give our listeners the chance to fall in love with this book too. And the best way to do that is if you would read that section to us.
Okay, I'm happy to. I found my second guru in a Southern California classroom. I had been getting happily lost in books since my Winnie the Pooh days, and had loved puns and rhymes and tongue twisters practically since I could speak. But John Fresius, my English teacher at Van Nuys High School, showed me that words could open into fathomless depths. He was a genuine wild man with a big gut, a prematurely gray crew cut, and a serious drinker's flushed complexion. He wore cheap white dress shirts with 2 breast pockets and a pack of tarry tins in each, always. He was copious in his profanity and ferocious in his skewering of hypocrites. Local ministers had pressured the school board more than once to fire him, but having gone straight from high school into combat in World War II, he was not easily intimidated. He had a trove of bad jokes and outdated slang that he repeated ritualistically. He called himself Uncle John, alluded often to his crush on the screen goddess Hedy Lamarr, here he gave a wolf whistle, and responded to any goopy sentimentality with, "I almost tossed my cookies." When you gave a good answer, he shouted, "Exactly!" When you gave a bad answer, he shook his big head till his jowls flapped. Mr. Fresius was driven to convey the astonishing power of words to express the joys and sorrows of human life. He was in his full glory when reading poetry aloud, his soaring Laurence Olivier elocution punctuated by Groucho Marx asides. When reading, say, a grim sonnet by Keats, dying at 25, burning with hopeless love and lust, he would look up with wide-eyed anguish that sharpened a moment later into a glare, a silent accusation that we'd insufficiently appreciated the doomed poet's tragedy. Then he'd growl, "That's rougher than a damned cob." When he reached the end of a poem, he would say, "Okay, let's take our shoes off and run through it." Then go back to the beginning and unpack it phrase by phrase, revealing all the subtle gears and levers of poetic technique, occasionally pausing to mutter, "God damn, that's good." He was skeptical of all over-the-counter spirituality, but once he told us about the time he drowned and, before being resuscitated, had an experience of ecstatic, limitless ease. And once in a dream, he met God, not the vindictive Sunday school bully that he mocked and defied, but an invisible God that was rolling peals of infinite laughter. At some point I knew I wanted to be Uncle John, or at least have his job. I eventually settled in New Jersey, where I taught English at a top-drawer prep school. I called myself Uncle Dean and couldn't explicate a poem without first saying, "Okay, let's take our shoes off and run through it." Everyone knew my classroom. It was the one with a circle of comfy couches instead of rows of desk chairs. For 33 years, I got paid to sit around reading books and talking about them with smart young people. And, oh yeah, marking papers. That part sucked. By then, I'd found other gurus, actual awakened sages from the East and the West, sometimes spending months with them in deep retreat, sometimes in ashrams where the first thing you do is take your shoes off. I had also read texts like the Upanishads and the Gospels, the dialogues of Plato and the sutras of the Buddha. I learned that spontaneous openings like my mad episode are not just odd neurological blips. They've been recognized through the ages as glimpses of the beingness that is the essence of all beings, just as colorless light is the essence of all colors. And I've learned that there are methods, skillful means for going beyond teasing glimpses. The simplest method is meditation, which turns out to be surprisingly easy if you take it easy, letting it pull you rather than pushing. 15-year-olds can do it, as I found out by slipping it into the curriculum. The sages taught, and I've gradually confirmed, What happens if we keep opening to the light of being, washing our lives in it day by day? We can deal gracefully with all life's noise and busyness on the outside, while on the inside we're as silent and crystal clear as an empty mirror. I had, in short, stumbled onto the Dharma, the path of awakening, and then just stayed on the path. It never occurred to me to do otherwise. In time, I began to see the connection between this awakening and the books and poems I loved, between the silence and the words. One exciting discovery was Emily Dickinson's testimony. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. There it was, the open cranium samadhi I had tasted at age 12, the stuff, the juice, the light that makes literature or soccer or architecture or anything sublime turns out to be the same clear light of enlightenment. And that light illuminates all the big questions, birth and death, hope and despair, love and fear, that literature explores. Some writers, like Dickinson or Salinger or Blake, are explicit about it. Their writing, like their lives, is consumed by the joy of diving into the light and the anguish of being cast again into darkness. With others, like Mark Twain or Toni Morrison, the light breaks in only occasionally, unbidden, through a side door. But they're astute observers, and even when they observe the pain of its absence, that pain implies the presence that should be. When Gatsby pines for Daisy, and Ahab for the white whale, and Vladimir and Estragon for Godot, they're all pining for the same light. So are their creators, and so are their readers. As it turns out, this light is never actually absent, only somehow overlooked. If the infinite is infinite, there can't be anywhere it isn't. That's recognized in the spiritual traditions of the West as well as the East, as in Psalm 139. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. Even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you.
Beautiful. We've never asked anybody to read part of their book before, I don't believe. I am hoping that people, from these passages that you've read, that people will get a little glimpse of the beauty of this book. I was completely blown away by it, and I read a lot of books. But tell me, during those 33 years teaching, you developed the Literature of Enlightenment program at the Independent Pingree School in New Jersey. And that was one of the longest running, most successful classroom meditation programs in the US. And students read books approaching the notion of enlightenment from a number of angles and in several world cultural contexts. Was that program the inspiration for this book?
Well, it helped. I certainly teaching that course where the kids were reading Plato, and they were reading Salinger, and they were reading Jack Kerouac. That very much went into this book, but also all my teaching. I taught 10th graders, which I love. 10th graders, 15-year-olds, have a kind of a wonderful freshness to their minds, which by the time, within a couple of years later, by the time they're 17, they may start getting a little bit too cool to get excited about things. I just teaching. I taught Macbeth. For instance, there's a chapter on Macbeth in this book. I taught Macbeth for 30 years to 10th graders. And that gave me the opportunity to really every year get deeper and deeper and deeper into the play, and starting to see, that's here. When the witches chant fair is foul and foul is fair, that sounds a whole lot like the Prajnaparamita Sutra, one of the platform scriptures of Buddhism, where they say form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Let's take a look at that.
So So how did you select the books that you've included in the Dharma Bum's guide?
Yeah. Well, some of them were just books, as I say, that like Macbeth, that I'd been teaching for so long that I was just brim full of it. I could not write about Macbeth. I could not write about Waiting for Godot. So those were gimmies. And then some of them, I have a wonderful editor. This book is being published by New World Library, which is just a terrific publishing house. They're headquartered in Northern California. And my editor there, Jason Gardner, was just a wonderful partner on this project. And, he really helped me kind of hammer out the reading list. Well, let's get little less of this, a little more of this. Originally I had some ideas. I need 3 Shakespeare plays. I need a tragedy, a comedy, and a history play. And that was going to wind up being a 1,000-page book. We couldn't do that. We hammered it out, and I tried to get some balance, and tried to get some older literature such as Shakespeare, some more recent stuff like J.D. Salinger and Toni Morrison, and then a few surprising things that you would not expect to see in a book on classic literature, like my chapter on The Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss,
Yep.
and my chapter on the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, Oklahoma.
Yeah, indeed. I want to talk about those a little bit later. Was there, were there any regrets about the books you had to leave out? Was there anything in particular that, you feel, if only I had a little bit more room?
Oh, yeah. And I even talk about that a little bit at the end. I would love to have written about Nabokov, written about Lolita, or he's got this crazy book, Pale Fire, that I would love to write about. So what I do at the end of the book is I suggest to the reader, well, you've got the idea now, you know the drill, you've seen how we do this, maybe, to explore those on your own.
Growing up in England, we did not have many of, certainly the American classics on our reading lists. So the books were not necessarily new to me, but the information that you supplied about the authors in many instances was. And, that I found to be so interesting. It really gave a wonderful background, to who they were and their writing, and enables one more easily, to see the insights that one might have missed otherwise.
Yes, and thank you for noticing that, because that also is a thing that came out of my years as a classroom teacher. I found that it was so important and so much fun, and as you say, so fascinating to bring these people alive as people. We tend to think of Shakespeare as like an institution or something, which he was not. He was a guy. Virginia Woolf was a woman with a very particular kind of life, and a fascinating life, and that very, very much is went into the literature that they produced, and in particular also some of these writers who were very actively engaged, as I mentioned in the introduction, in cultivating and exploring the enlightenment path. They may not have used that word, but certainly the prime example, which is chapter 1, which is why I made it chapter 1, is William Blake. William Blake has this little 4-line poem that I talk about called Eternity, where many, many years before the teachings of Buddha came to England, Blake gives the whole four noble truths there in 4 little lines.
Yeah. That was one of my favorites, I have to say.
Yeah. And
And
this whole interest, Blake was such an odd character, and people at his time thought he was a lunatic because he was such a visionary. And really, it took a lot more years after he died for people to recognize his genius.
Yes, absolutely. But people certainly do recognize it now. It's and it's interesting to get so much insight into them. You know, when were you first aware that you were gaining things from these books that maybe other people weren't? Because I mean, you know, we read a book, we read a novel or something, and we read it often for what it is. The insights that you have gained from many of them, you know, are very deep.
You know, to some degree, this is just the way my mind has always worked. I can't remember a time that I wasn't doing this. But another thing that was helpful is I was in on the founding of something called Maharishi International University. At the time, at the time, I actually was a teacher of transcendental meditation. I moved on from that method to something a more universal approach to teaching meditation. But at that time, I was a TM teacher, and back in the early 70s, Maharishi had this vision to start a university that would teach all the standard disciplines such as physics and chemistry and music and literature, but in the light of the knowledge of enlightenment. So there I really started cultivating, you know, with the help of the faculty there. And I was a teaching assistant, so I was, you know, really getting up to my elbows right away in doing this kind of interpretation. And in fact, the final project, I got a master's degree from MIU, and my final project for my master's degree was to take a topic that had not been covered and explore it in this light. And I wrote a paper on the movies. I wrote about The Godfather and King Kong and several others. And many years later, that I expanded that paper, and that became a book that I wrote called Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies. So
I bet that's an interesting read.
Oh yeah, that one's a lot of fun as well. So the same kind of thing that I do with literature in this book, I did with movies in that book. And when I was writing that book, a lot of friends heard, "Oh, you're writing a book on enlightenment in the movies. Well, you have to write about the Matrix," and they would mention all these kind of obvious things. So I figured, well, anything that they can see, that's no fun. That's already obvious. So I deliberately wrote about Jaws and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Godfather, all these films where you would think, well, there can't possibly be any enlightenment content there, but I'm going to show you that there is.
Was it harder? Was it harder to find in those movies than it was in the the books?
Not for me. that's just that, you know, the nature of my wife and I would walk out of the theater after seeing a movie, and I would just be brimming with this stuff. I'd say, well, look, you know, when the hero says this thing and then that thing happens, and you know, that's just like the. And she would say, finally, she said, "Dean, why don't you go sit down and write this stuff down? Leave me alone. Write this stuff down." And that's how that book came to be.
Yeah. So tell me, which of all of the books is your favourite that you covered in this book? Is it, you know, Blake and his works, or?
Gee, that's really an impossible question. I mean, you know, it's just you know, there's an old saying, and actually that was a popular song here some decades ago, when you love the one you're with, when you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. And that's how it is when you're in the middle of watching a great movie, dancing to a great piece of music. You're not evaluating it, saying, okay, this one is 3 points better than that one. It's like, right now, this is it. There's nowhere else I want to be. And that's what great literature, great music, great painting, great anything does for you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, often we do find ourselves elevated by these books. It is, you know, and can be a numinous experience, but
Yes.
we're not necessarily looking at it in the same way you are. I mean, I just love the way, writers like you string words together and your descriptions. And that for me is elevating without me, finding some kind of spiritual meaning within that.
Right. And no, you've really put your finger on something important there, which is that even, I'm sort of, as I said in that introduction that I read, just as my teacher John Freese has pointed out all the gears and levers of poetic technique that show how the poem has its effect on you. But even without having that pointed out, it has that effect. You don't know why, perhaps. I don't know why I feel elevated, as you say, but I do. But
exactly.
It's also fun. But for me, it's also fun, and it does deepen your appreciation to have the gears and levers pointed out, and then, as you say, to point out, well, here are the elements of the writer's life that went into it, and so forth.
Yeah. We're going to take a small break here, Dean. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is speaker, workshop leader, meditation teacher, and award-winning author Dean Sluyter. And we're talking about his latest book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics, which demonstrates how inspiration and spiritual insight can be found anywhere, at any time, in any situation. We'll be back with more from Dean Sluyter after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Media's flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And I have a question for you. Have you ever walked through a bookstore and known in your heart that you should have a book on one of those shelves, but don't know how to make it happen? Writing your story and getting your book into print may feel intimidating, but it's remarkably easy and satisfying when you have an experienced professional to guide you. So if you're still striving to connect with your muse, find your authentic voice, formulate your ideas, present your message in compelling prose, publish your book, and build your platform and profile, just imagine what you could accomplish with 30 plus years of experience in writing, editing, publishing, judging, hosting, and resonance marketing to guide you. Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. If you know you have a book in you, but don't know how to get it out of your head and into the hands of those who are waiting to read it, visit sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab, and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's sedgbeer.com, sedgbeer.com.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
if you could find a way,
To get inside.
each other's mind.
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my
shoes.
shoes.
We've all felt left out, and for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back. Dean Sluyter, you told us earlier about cinema nirvana. You mentioned the book Memento in that book. Sorry, the movie Memento. That's the Christopher Nolan film, isn't it? The one where everything is done in backflashes. Is that the one? Dean, are you with us? Hello, Dean. Can you hear us?
Hello, Sandie. I'm sorry, I lost you there for a moment. Okay. Here we are.
Okay. Let's. I'll repeat what I was saying. You talked in the first half of the show about cinema nirvana, and one of the movies that you cover is Memento. Isn't that the Christopher Nolan film? That kind of everything seems to unfold backwards. Is that the movie that I'm thinking of? How did you... I know so many people whose minds were blown by that movie, not because of anything that was, overtly spiritual in it, but just because of the construction of it. How did you find... What did you find in it?
Well, of course, the premise of it is that the hero, we're seeing things from the hero's point of view, and he is a man who, because he's been hit over the head, has lost his ability to form new memories. And so, the ironic thing is there's this whole kind of almost a spiritual cliche about, living in the moment, living in the now, and he has no choice. The now is all that he has. So that was a very interesting idea, and he's trying to track down who killed his wife. So he's like the world's worst detective because of his brain injury. But then the really ingenious aspect of the film is because it's told in backwards order. First we see the last scene, then the scene before that, then the scene before that. That puts us into the hero's shoes. Like him, we only know what's going on now. He doesn't know how he got there. For instance, there's one scene where he's running through a parking lot, and there's another guy a couple of rows over also running, and we hear the hero in his internal monologue and voiceover saying, well, what's happening here? I guess I'm chasing that guy. And then suddenly the other guy starts shooting at him and goes, oh, nope, I guess he's chasing me. So it just very forcefully puts us in that situation of, now is all we've got.
Well, I didn't get that from it then, but I understand it now. Back then, I was too busy trying to work out, what is this film all about? So you also wrote a book in 1998 called Why the Chicken Crossed the Road and Other Hidden Enlightenment Teachings from the Buddha to Bebop to Mother Goose. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Right. So that was my first book, and what I did in that book was I looked at jokes and nursery rhymes and pop song lyrics and so forth, things that we all know, and once again, things where we would think that there's no enlightenment content, there's no spiritual content. So, songs like Mary Had a Little Lamb or old jokes like Why Did the Chicken Cross the Road, and so forth, and showing that no, it's there. See, the thing about the infinite is, if the infinite is truly the infinite, it's got to be everywhere. It's if I say to you, well, the infinite is everywhere except on this right here in this tiny little dot at the tip of my ballpoint pen. If that's the one place the infinite is not, then it's not infinite, it's finite. So it's got to be everywhere, and that includes, it's got to be in the corniest jokes, it's got to be in the most familiar song lyrics, and to me, the great game, the great fun is seeing it, is just kind of penetrating the surface and revealing it.
So why did the chicken cross the road? That's kind of a koan. It's kind of in Zen practice, you have these riddles that don't really have an answer. They don't have an answer that can be put into words.
and their purpose is to keep the mind opening up. You know, when you ask a question, you know, how much is 37 times 108? The mind is opened up for a moment. We don't know what this is going to be. We're opened up kind of omnidirectionally to a bunch of possibilities. Then we're told the answer. Oh, it's this much, and the mind closes down again. So in a sense, a koan serves the purpose of being unanswerable. We just keeps the mind opening and opening. To me, why did the chicken cross the road is a koan like that. Now, in my current book, in the Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, I point out a couple of koans in literature. One of them is in The Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield, the adolescent hero, who's knocking around Manhattan trying to go home and face his parents and tell them that he flunked out of yet another school. And he's a very sensitive young guy, and winter's coming on, and he just feels very oppressed by society. And he starts asking everyone he meets, where do the ducks in Central Park go when the pond freezes over? And, no one has an answer. But that's really his koan. That's really his life question. He's really asking, where can I go when life just seems so grim and cold and unwelcoming and it makes me feel so much anxiety and so much depression. Where is salvation from that? Where is resolution of all of that? Where do the ducks go when the pond freezes over?
Do you feel that you've got the best job in the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
Having the opportunity to read all these books and then write about them.
Oh, I am just so lucky, and the chance that I get to do that, and I get to teach meditation and insight. Just before I got on the line with you, I just finished an hour and a half Zoom session, which actually these days I conduct Zoom sessions 3 times a week, and I have people from all over the world who join them. By the way, they're free. Anyone can join. If you go to my website, you can see how to sign up for them. And I lead meditation. And one of the things that I point out a number of times in the Dharma Bum's Guide is that the big the big misconception that people have about meditation is they think it has to be difficult, and that what I show people, and what I was fortunate enough to learn from my teachers, is that actually, if you take it easy, meditation is the easiest thing in the world. When you stop pushing and just let yourself be pulled, it's like, oh, gravity takes over. There's nothing to it.
I was going to ask you, because I read that you've been teaching natural approaches to meditation and awakening, which made me wonder, well, aren't all of the approaches to meditation natural?
Well, no. And in fact, what many people, maybe what most people think of when they think of meditation, is unnatural. They think of, trying to concentrate, trying to control the mind, trying to manipulate how we feel, trying to clear the mind. And this is why you hear from people, so many people get that impression, well, meditation, I know it's beneficial, it lowers your blood pressure, it helps your relationships, et cetera, but, it's so difficult. I tried to do it, and it was so hard. Well, if you tried to do it, see, the thing is that's self-defeating. And here's the thing. Here's, to me, kind of the E = MC² of meditation. It took me years to come up with this sentence. So listen up carefully to this sentence. Any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation. Right? So it's self-defeating. It's like you're looking out across the surface of the ocean and you're saying, the ocean is so turbulent, all these waves. I want a nice calm ocean. So you take a paddle and start whap, 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 trying to flatten out all the waves. It doesn't work. You just stir up more turbulence. But if instead of doing that, you allow gravity to pull you down a couple of meters below the surface, you discover, oh, down here, it's always silent. Doesn't matter what's going on the surface. Doesn't matter what's going on the surface. And that's how natural meditation works. It uses the natural gravitation of the mind to go towards peace, to go toward fulfillment, to go towards settling, which is, that's what we're trying to do all the time, every moment, every life decision we make. Do I want this flavor of ice cream or that flavor? What you really want is the nirvana flavor, but it's not on the menu, so we settle for something else. That's pretty much our life in a nutshell. So what we do in natural meditation is just let that gravity take over. And by the way, I have studied with a number of teachers in traditions so what I call natural meditation using plain English has different names. In Zen, it's called shikantaza, just sitting. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called Dzogpa Chenpo or Dzogchen, the natural great perfection, and so forth. So this is not something that I made up.
You wrote a book in 2018. You published it called Fear Less, Living Beyond Fear, Anxiety, Anger and Addiction. Just in time, because, since then, 2020, more and more people have gone into fear and anxiety and anger and addiction during COVID, etc. And you have a number of free videos on your website, don't you? Tell us about some of these techniques to help people live beyond fear and anxiety.
And as you mentioned, if people go to my website, which is deanssluyter.com, and by the way, Sluyter is hard to spell, so if you go to deanwords.com, that will take you to the same place, deanwords.com. And right there on the home page, I've got a link to one video called something like 5 Simple Ways to Cut Through Anxiety. And they're real, just simple, practical methods, and none of them involve trying to psychoanalyze yourself or trying to suppress your emotions, which never works. So there are things like there's a technique that comes from the yogic tradition of the buzzing bee technique, where you put use your thumbs to close the flaps of your ears and put your couple of other fingers over your eyelids, and you close your eyes, and you buzz, you make kind of a humming sound with your lips not quite together, and that creates this kind of humming inside your skull that's extremely soothing to the nervous system. It's really like you've got your own little instant cave wherever you go. And I demonstrate that in the video, and there's some things you can do with your breathing. And one of my favorite mantras is "wee," which I learned this one actually from a friend. I was going through some emotional turbulence at the time, and she said, "Just remember this, Dean. You can never have a bad time as long as you say wee." So I show people, okay, just throw your arms out in a gesture of just idiotic exuberance and say wee, and then try to be depressed. You can't do it.
Yeah, no, you can't.
Really good. That one's really good for cutting through depression and grouchiness and so forth. I got an email some time ago from a woman who told me, my husband and I attended a workshop of yours in Austin, Texas, and I wanted you to know that a few weeks later we were driving our new Lexus home from the dealer. We were on the highway and we were broadsided by a state trooper. Our car was knocked into the ditch. It rolled over a couple of times. When it finally came to a stop, my husband and, kind of the dust settled. My husband and I looked at each other. We realized we were both okay, and spontaneously and simultaneously, we threw out our arms and we said, "Whee!"
Your bio says that you live in Santa Monica, where you teach meditation, sing with the West Side Threshold Choir, play old songs on the ukulele, and happily zip about on your Vespa. When you're zipping about, are you going wee all the time?
Sometimes, it's a very. That is a very. Someday I'm going to write a book about the Dharma of Vespa riding. You're just because wherever you go, I'm going to the drugstore. It doesn't matter. It makes going everywhere fun. You're in the open sky, and it's great.
Yeah, they are fun. I'd love to have. I've spent a lot of time in Santa Monica. I haven't ever seen you, but I hope I will one day see you go wee-in and whizzing past me. That certainly will bring a smile to my face. So you co-hosted a podcast, I think. Do you still do it? Called The Philosophers?
Yeah, we've been a little bit quiet recently, but that still is ongoing. This was really started by a friend of mine, Christopher Bush. He's a friend of mine since childhood, and he's a former child actor. And drawing on my background, writing about film, and just as a lifelong, film lover, we started doing this podcast where we interview a lot of interesting people from world film, the people who make films and the people who love films. And there's a link to that on my website as well.
Yeah, I saw that. What kind of people have you been talking to?
Well, we interviewed David Lynch. That was a lot of fun. David Lynch, he wound up spending a lot of the interview talking about how when he was first getting started, he used to sit in a hamburger joint, which actually was right near where I went to high school, called Bob's Big Boy. And he would write scripts on the napkins there, and he told us all about his quest for the perfect milkshake in his days at Bob's Big Boy. We interviewed Michael Imperioli, who a lot of people know him from a starring role in The Sopranos, and he's also, what a lot of people don't know is he's a very serious practitioner of Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. And in fact, you may notice he was kind enough to endorse my new book. We've interviewed a number of, actors, set designers, a lot of people behind the scenes. I'm married actually to a film editor, so I have a real appreciation of the people whose names a lot of people don't pay attention to, but who really, they're the ones that make the movies.
Yeah. Well, Michael Imperioli, he really summed up the book, didn't he? He said in his endorsement that it holds the magic to convert literary junkies into mystic warriors and the power to turn spiritual seekers into lovers of letters, a must for bookworms and psychonauts, devotees as well as neophytes. As recommendations go, that's a pretty hard one to beat.
Yeah, that was great. No, he was very generous.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy, by the way. Very. I really recommend take a look at the Philosophers interview we did with Michael Imperioli, because he's a very thoughtful, very serious guy, and really tries to bring the values of his spiritual path to his filmmaking.
I was going to ask you about one of your other books, which was the Zen Commandments. So tell me about that book.
Yeah. So the premise of the Zen Commandments was, okay, if I went to the mountaintop and had to come down with 10 things to recommend that people do, I'm not much into giving commandments, but if I had let's say 10 suggestions for people to follow for living a happy, good, awakened life, what would if I can just summarize it, and that I would say every people sometimes ask me which is my favorite of my own books, but that's like asking you, which is your favorite child. And they all have different virtues. The virtue of that book is it's my shortest book, and it's kind of the simplest. Okay, let's just boil everything down to 10 simple things to remember.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you one last question. Jorge Luis Borges said that when writers die, they become books, which is, after all, not too bad, an incarnation. If that is true, what kind of book will you become?
Well, I think I just wrote it. I have to tell you that this book was brewing inside me for over 40 years, and I really had this thought for a long, long time, which was, if someday I'm on my deathbed and I have not written this book, I'm going to really be mad at myself. And it's the only thing that I had that thought about, and now I've written that book, so I guess this is the one.
This is the one you're going to become. Okay. Dean Sluyter, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for this beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you, Sandie.
The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics, which is published by New World Library, is available just about everywhere, I should imagine. For more information about Dean Sluyter, his books, events, and his free online meditations, visit deansluyter.com, Sluyter, or deanbooks.com.
No, Dean Words.
Oh, sorry, words. Word or words? Dean Words. Okay,
Words.
not Dean's Words.
No, deanwords.com.
Okay, deanwords.com. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What Is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me.